Hello, and welcome to Ontology Explained. I'm Casey Hart, philosopher and ontologist, and today we're going to talk about my pdoom. What is the probability that I think that AI is going to cause human extinction? And my probability is way less than 0.999, and that number was chosen in particular because I did something that you're not supposed to do. I read the comments, and I always read the comments, so if you got something you want to say to me, drop it down below. I'll probably read it. But in particular, one person named GasDive, well, hopefully that's not their actual name. That's just the Google account that they came up with. But they commented that I wasn't exactly the most fair to Hank Green and Nate Soares, and they were sort of disappointed because they want me to calm them down and not be so stressed out about the possibility of doom. So after a back and forth in a little bit, I said, you know what? How about I make you a video? You give me what you think the best case is. And so this video right here is me trying to undermine GasDive's best case that their pdoom is 0.999, and I will tell you why mine's way lower than that. How are we going to do that? First, I'm just going to start with the positive account. What is my general position? Why is my general credence that AI is going to lead to doom pretty low? Then we'll look in particular at GasDive's argument. What's their position? I tried to, flesh it out as charitably as I could. I'll lay that out. And then I'm going to go point by point, responding to those premises. Which ones do I think are good? Which ones are bad? How does the argument hang together on the whole? And then we'll see where that leaves us. And hopefully, GasDive and everybody else out there, we will come a little closer to the truth, and hopefully that truth will be that we don't need to be quite as stressed out about artificial superintelligence killing us all. And before I get into all of that great stuff, I want to say a thank you to a listener out there who sponsored this video. Jokingly sponsored, but this shirt that I'm wearing today is from one of my absolute favorite listeners to this YouTube channel. So shout out there to Jeremy, and appreciate it. What do y'all think? Look good? Let me know. Okay. What's my view on artificial superintelligence and pdoom? Well, before we say that, I should say, what is pdoom? And I did pdoom in the title, but the rest of this is going to be prdoom. It's a probability function. I always want to see PR. That's just the way I did my Bayesian epistemology stuff. So PRs are going to creep in. Doom, what is that proposition? Doom is that artificial intelligence will directly lead to the extinction of humanity. It's an extinction level event. Now, you might have stronger or weaker versions of this. The strong AI pdoom would be something like AI directly and intentionally leads to our demise, right? So computers become sentient. ASI comes around and says, these humans are a problem, we're killing them all, right? Exterminates us intentionally. But you could imagine a bunch of other variants too, even a very weak variant of doom where AI plays a role in the deaths of large swaths of humanity. Maybe it's just because it's unintentional, right? Perhaps it was trying to paperclip Max and humans, there just wasn't room for us, and so we died off, but it wasn't like actively killing us. Or maybe it does it in other ways, right? Maybe AI is used as a tool to develop a virus, and then somebody's able to kill off humanity using that. Is that doom because of AI? In a sense. But I think when people talk about the pdoom, they're really thinking that this super powerful, super intelligent AI force intentionally wipes us out or acts capriciously, or does some things that we do not expect, and that leads to the extinction of humanity. I throw paperclip maxing in here. This is an argument that gets brought up a lot by doomers, where you say, just give an AI a really simple task, like, hey, all we want you to do is make as many paperclips as you can. And that seems simple and innocuous until you realize that it's going to try and get all the resources it can in order to maximize the number of paperclips it can make. And it wants more factory space and all the natural resources. And eventually humanity dies off because AI was just trying to make all the paperclips that it could. So this is supposed to illustrate something to the effect of that AI can kill us all, even if it's not intentionally trying to kill us all. It might just be instrumental to its chief ends, not malicious whatsoever. So, since we know what pdoom is, why is mine way less than 0.99? And in fact, I think mine's way, way less than 0.1. I think there is a substantially less than 10% chance that at any point in the future, artificial superintelligence is the reason that humanity goes extinct. Why is it so low? Several different reasons. First off, is that my prior that any particular cause is going to be the thing that kills all humans is pretty low, right? By definition, if humans go extinct, it's only going to happen one time. I mean, I guess we could revive the species and then go extinct again. But there's not going to be a lot of times that humans go extinct if we ever do, and only one thing's going to be the cause of that. And there are many potential causes of human extinction. So if I'm just indifferent among all of them to start with, my credence that any one thing is the cause is going to be pretty low. And I'm also very low on thinking that artificial superintelligence will be brought about. I've talked about this in other videos and in other podcasts and things, but building ASI is crazy hard. Building anything is hard, right? Just think about projects you're doing at work right now that are even remotely sophisticated. You're like, geez, I got to get a team of 5 people together and we have to build this software that is going to make a calendar widget that's going to display things exactly as we want at the right times. That's going to be tricky. That's going to take me a quarter, maybe 6 months to get just right. Okay. Fine. Now think about building superintelligence, the thing that is smarter than all humans at all times, at all tasks. That turns out to be way, way harder. And I'm skeptical that that's going to come about. And therefore, it's probably not going to be the thing that kills us. And then just back to the prior piece, right? Even if we are going to go extinct, there are lots of things that I think are more likely than artificial superintelligence doing the trick, or artificial general intelligence, AI of any sort, right? Climate change has, in my mind, a way higher chance of making the planet uninhabitable and therefore leading to the extinction of humanity. So with the use of nuclear weapons, I would put that even higher than climate change. Or maybe new pandemics of more serious viruses. And maybe that one's more likely to wipe out most of humanity, but not all of humanity. It's not be an extinction level event. But in terms of things that I'm really worried about, and there are lots of things I'm really worried about, AI is just not that high on the list. AI doom is not keeping me nearly as scared as some of these other things. So those are sort of my positive cases for why I have a low credence that doom is true. But there are some defensive reasons as well. When I look at the people who are making the other case that are saying we should think that doom is very high, I'm just not compelled by any of those reasons. Now, that doesn't mean in and of itself that we should not think that doom is going to happen. But if I look out there and I say, look, there are lots of you people who are trying to make this case, and I'm not compelled by any of you, even the really smart ones, then that does give me some reason to think that the case is pretty weak and that my low credence is justified. You might notice, too, if you pay attention here, and I was particularly struck by this in Nick Bostrom's book, Superintelligence, when you find what are the predictions of superintelligence, what are the predictions of AI death, it's just always like just around the corner, right? Just a little farther, 5 years, 10 years from now. And that moving goalpost makes me think that, like, inductively, I'm pretty warranted in thinking that we're going to make it another 5 years and another 5 years and another 5 years, right? People telling me about ASI doom are kind of like when I go on a hike with my dad and he's like, we're just almost there, right? I remember this as a kid. Oh, basically there, right? Just around the next corner. And the hike always felt much longer than that. That's where AI doom is, always perpetually around that corner. But let's suppose that artificial superintelligence was around the corner, right? We know that ASI is coming. Well, even if that were true, would I think that, OpenAI and Anthropic and all these companies would be selling us chatbots? That seems like a really trivial and stupid thing to do if you were going to be creating the thing that could do everything better than every human, right? Maybe there's some value for them to still use them as chatbots to like gather more training data and understand how to market their product. But largely, if I'm building something that's going to be so smart that it'll cure cancer, I'm not saying, let me get my web interface right. Let me figure out the right way to price tokens for Microsoft. No, I'm just going to cure cancer and do all of these crazy good and crazy profitable things. Since I don't see that, it makes me way more skeptical that ASI is coming. Also, whenever I push on like the major advancements, these like crazy earth-shattering things or like scary things that AI is threatening to kill its creators or willing to lie and cheat, and I push on them just a little bit, I don't find anything there. And those lies or mistruths make me think that the case for doom is really overstated, and I'm more confident in my relatively low credence that AI is going to kill us all. And then lastly, but not least, the arguments that I see in favor of doom being very high are usually made by people that stand to profit from those narratives. And if that's true, then that is enough for me to like undercut the credibility of their sales pitch as well. And that just means I don't have many good arguments for doom, and I feel like my priors and arguments against doom are relatively good. I'm certainly not anywhere near 0.999 on that credence. That said, let's look at it. Let's try and make the case that our pdoom should be 0.999, and for that, let's look at GasDive's argument here. So thanks again to GasDive. I really appreciate your interaction. It was one of those internet conversations that could have gotten disrespectful and rude real fast, and then it didn't, and it culminated with you giving me some content to generate a video, so I am grateful for that, however the rest of this works out. I will do a little bit of a caveat here. It's the argument star. So maybe I'll read this at the very end of the video after as like a credits. I'll definitely put it down below in the description and link to it. They're like 5 paragraphs or something like that here. I ultimately didn't find that argument very compelling, and I'm going to say why, but part of it was structural as well. So what you see here is my best attempt at charitably reconstructing it, putting the pieces together in the best way I think I could to lead to the conclusion that our credence should be 0.999 that doom will happen. So hopefully these are all friendly amendments to GasDive. You can correct me or others down below if I'm getting something wrong. Let me know what I'm getting wrong. Point 1, they say ASI is possible. It's physically possible. We could end up with artificial superintelligence, and we can defend this in a number of ways, but chiefly something like, look, it's already better than humans at chess. It can be better than humans at various individual domains, and we can combine those together, and that gets what we want. Also, humans are smart, but we could be smarter, right? There's space for us to grow intellectually and in terms of intelligence, and artificial intelligence can fill that place and just do it way better than us. That's why we can get ASI. And not only can we get ASI, but there are no barriers to us getting there. Humans are going to build ASI. And to make this case, GasDive considered a whole bunch of things that might get in the way and said that ultimately none of these barriers are really going to stop ASI from coming. People won't stop themselves. If you look at the folks who are working at Anthropic or OpenAI, many of them think that their pdoom is bigger than 5% or 10%. Many of them think it's a very serious risk, and yet they nonetheless continue to try and build this thing. And, historically, we see, the invention of nuclear weapons, all sorts of things that have devastating impacts. We don't have good reason to think that humans will prevent themselves from inventing ASI. And society's not going to be much better. Now, there are international treaties, there are agreements, there are things, but there are also always rogue nations. There are politicians that get into power who throw away treaties and do other sorts of things. We just don't think that international law and order is going to be strong enough here to prevent people from development of ASI, as dangerous as it may be or seem. And then there are other things that look like they might go wrong with AI, and they maybe even will. Like the AI bubble might burst, but even if the AI bubble bursts, there will still be governments, there will still be other companies. In fact, if the AI bubble bursts, maybe the assets will just be super cheap and another company can buy them all up and make ASI even more quickly because they get like all of the most important findings of all of these current AI companies. Climate disaster, that's not going to prevent ASI. In fact, it might accelerate it because people think of it as a panacea, some way to solve the problems of the lack of water and heat and rising oceans. Asteroids not going to stop it. Basically, any natural disaster, climate disaster, even if they may or may not happen, they're probably not going to cause humans to go extinct, and they might actually raise the urgency for development of tools like ASI. So, like it or not, it's possible and it's coming. That's what GasDive says. 3, So ASI is possible. We're going to end up with it. And then it's going to be unaligned. We just can't solve the alignment problem. I've had another video on what the alignment problem is, but essentially it's just, can we get on the same page with AI so that its values are our values? We are happy with the outputs that it does. It doesn't mean that we directly control it and tell it what to do necessarily, but it might even be a little stronger than that. It does what we would want it to do if we were as smart and informed as it is. Now, in order to make the argument tighter here, I wanted to connect the premise and conclusion, so I thought we needed something like an if-then premise. So I just said this was implied by the argument that I read in the YouTube comments. And they say, if we end up with unaligned ASI, then we're doomed. So the first three premises are supposed to like establish that there's going to be unaligned ASI, and then we need to tighten that and say that's going to mean that we're doomed. And it's going to mean that we're doomed to roughly the percentage or the credence that we think 1 through 3 are going to happen. So from 1 through 3, GasDive makes the case that the probability we end up with unaligned ASI is very high, 0.999. Maybe it's 0.99, maybe it's 0.9999, but like nines. That's where we're at in terms of our credence. And when you stack all of those 5 things together, I would agree that your probability of doom should be 0.999. Okay, that's the case. Hopefully I've done a charitable job of piecing that together. And if you're super scared, let me try to calm you down. Let's respond to each of those premises, all of the things that we've been talking about. First off, you're telling me there's a chance ASI is possible. What did they argue? Well, yeah, it's physically possible because we already have these domain-specific ASIs, and it's just going to tie together more. Like there's this space. Okay. Is it possible? Sure. Fundamentally, I don't have any problem with saying that artificial superintelligence is a physical possibility. Now, I'm going to caveat that just a little bit because it depends on what you mean by artificial superintelligence. If what we mean is something that can simulate everything that ever has happened, will happen, or could possibly happen, and therefore tell us with absolute certainty what the best course of action is in any situation, no. I don't think that's physically possible. Why? The amount of power that it's going to take to generate those computations, the amount of computational space is so huge that it just can't be done, right? But if we mean something like a little bit simpler here, that ASI is something that is smarter, even much smarter than every human on the planet, or anywhere in the solar system, or anywhere in the galaxy, etc. Sure, I think that that is physically possible. I'm willing to stipulate that. That's great. We just can't turn it into some sort of like God capable of physically impossible things. So put that off to the side. Okay. But part of the argument for the possibility of ASI here is that we get from these domain cases of dominance to general intelligence that just holds across all of the domains. And I think that's too fast. Why is that too fast? Well, combining is not trivial, right? There are lots of times when we can have the different pieces, right? But so I have no problem thinking that ASI can beat everyone in chess. Of course it does, right? It's better than all of us. I have no problem thinking that it can be better than all of us in Go, or that it can be better at analyzing trends in the stock market than I am. Great, pick any single thing, and I absolutely agree, maybe even several things bundled together. But what we need from artificial superintelligence is that it can combine all of those things across all interests, decide which level of expertise to use. This sort of executive function and combining is really, really tricky, right? So I've got, a picture of Levi Rosman on the screen there, right? He is a international master at chess. He's not a grandmaster at chess. He has beaten the best chess players of all time. And you could say when he beats Magnus Carlsen, like, okay, he has all he needs to be a grandmaster. But it is far different to win 1 or 2 chess matches or solve 1 or 2 really complicated chess problems. Compare that to being the person who can solve and beat every chess player at all times, right? Or consistently enough to be a grandmaster level. Tying the stuff together is difficult. And also, while we do see some success in artificial intelligence and great success in AI, like I don't want to underplay that, we don't see AI doing all things, right? We don't see, for instance, the large language models. Those aren't doing any learning. We have training data sets, and then we have a static model that is responding to context one thing at a time, but it's not learning and changing. And part of what makes for general intelligence or super intelligence is something that is flexible, fungible, can learn entirely new things, can take old lessons, throw them out, right? And we don't see that happening with artificial intelligence. And that's a huge hurdle. It's certainly something that puts my date on AI, like AGI, ASI, far farther out in the future. Premise 2. So this is the claim that we're not going to stop AI, right? And let me just grant it. Like, okay, people won't stop themselves, and society won't stop us. The AI bubble bursting won't stop it, nor will climate disaster, nor will an asteroid. Let's just grant, for the sake of argument, that there are a bunch of things happening, and people have, profit motives such that those are not going to be the things that prevent ASI from coming around. So what? Right? There are lots of physically possible scary things out there, right? We could be afraid of dragons and dinosaurs and all different sorts of things. But just because you can list a bunch of things that won't prevent that from happening doesn't mean that nothing will prevent that thing from happening, right? Showing 5 reasons they won't be prevented doesn't prove that they will happen. And we don't even consider, GasDive doesn't consider, the possibility that ASI is just too freaking hard to build. And that's the greatest hurdle here, right? As cool as it would be to have ASI, even if everybody wanted ASI, even if that was the sole goal of everybody on the planet, I'm not convinced that it would come about anytime soon. I'm still not convinced that it would ever come about, but the hurdles are so great that I don't expect it to be here. My over-under on AGI, I think, is like 2075. And I don't quite know how I feel about that. It's a long ways out there, and ASI would be even farther than that. So as much as we would like to say, here's a reason why we can't prevent AI, here's a reason why we can't prevent AI, you need to give me the positive case for why we think there will be ASI, and I don't see that happening. And frankly, I don't like debates about burden of proof, but in general, the party saying that we are going to come up with an intelligence that is so powerful that it's better than any human ever has been or any human probably ever will be, right? That feels like they get the burden of proof there. Why do we think that ASI is going to come about? So compare to other arguments that we could make here, right? If I tell you that dragons, right, would be absolutely terrifying if they came about, and a lot of things that are not going to stop people from bringing about dragons, right? People would genetically engineer and create dragons, and societies probably wouldn't be great at making legislations that would prevent the existence of dragons. And even if an asteroid hit the Earth, or even if there was global warming, like, dragons could still come about. But like, why are we not seeing giant fire-breathing dragons? They're hard to make, right? You could say the same thing about like super smart carrier pigeons in previous eras, right? Like, this would have been a huge military advantage for someone to make these carrier pigeons that were so well trained and sentient that they could like speak and communicate perfectly with people. Like, why don't these things come about? Because they're really hard to bring about. And I don't know if those are the best metaphors, but hopefully you get my point here, right? We need a stronger case for artificial superintelligence coming about, and I don't see it. I also put self-replicating Roombas in here. That'd be a funny thing to think about. And it would be awesome, right? The companies would want to make their own Roombas that could, replicate themselves. But I don't think we're going to have that kind of problem anytime soon. Okay. Third premise that GasDive talks about. Can we get aligned? If we can't align, we're going to have this unaligned ASI, and that's going to be a serious problem. Well, here again, I think it's important to talk about our definitions. How likely is it that we can align with artificial superintelligence, even if we were to grant that it comes about? Well, what do you mean by superintelligence? Do you mean that it is an infinitely intelligent competitor, something that wants the same space as I have and is way smarter than me in every possible way? Well, sure, it's going to be hard for me to get aligned with that. But like, what if the thing I'm trying to align with is a disinterested but like maximally smart computer? I don't find it that hard to think that I can get aligned with that, right? That I can make it so that that computer is at least not directly at odds with all of my aims. It's certainly logically possible, right? And logical or physical possibility is something that's really important in this context. So since I can imagine a possible future where I get along with these robots, why is that enough? Certainly, why is the fact that I know it could be difficult to get along with said possible robots. Why does that get us all the way to 0.999 probability that we're doomed? That number just jumps out of nowhere, and we're going to come back to that in just a second. Then we have the premise that I added to GasDive's argument, which is to tie together those first three premises with the conclusion, this conditional, that if we end up with unaligned ASI, we're doomed. Now, this is not clear at all to me. Like, why is there this connection between having these super smart things and our doom? Of course, it's like dangerous to have a thing that's more powerful than us and not directly tied into our interests if it's unaligned. But it doesn't follow from that immediately that we will all die, that there'll be a human level of extinction, and certainly not that we would be incredibly confident that humans would become extinct. So they say one thing that I found kind of interesting in their passage, that mountain gorillas don't rule humans and we won't rule AI. Now that's true. So if we say like the metaphor here holds that ASI would be as much smarter than us as we are than mountain gorillas. Okay, let me say I grant that for the sake of argument, but why does not ruling AI equate to us being doomed? And here I came across the really nice positive piece of news that mountain gorilla populations are up right now, so that's cool. Now, I'm the first to say that mountain gorillas are not in a position of strength relative to humans in terms of determining their own, existence as a species versus extinction. Like, humans could make it so that mountain gorillas go extinct, and I hope we do not. But the fact that that's the metaphor, and that mountain gorillas are still around, not going extinct, in fact, they are now increasing in number, is at least some direct evidence against the confidence that GasDive seems to have that having a smarter AI in the future would cause humans to go extinct as well. So then we get this important premise, right? We've put a bunch of things together in premises 1 through 3, and then we tie 1 through 3 with the conclusion. But 1 through 3 have to make the conclusion that we end up with an unaligned ASI at being incredibly probable, namely 0.999. And this was just crazy. No offense, GasDive, but there's no reason, that number is just pulled out of thin air. So what is one of the strongest responses I can have here, but it's just unsubstantiated. And when we think about probabilities and how they work and what they stand for, I think it should make it really clear that 0.99 is not justified. Why? Well, in probability theory and in Bayesian epistemology, things like that, you only want to assign 1 and 0 to things that are tautologies or contradictions. So P or not P is certainly true. Either a proposition is true or its negation is true. Okay, if that holds, then I can be certain that P or not P is P. So either the sun will rise tomorrow or it's not the case that the sun will rise tomorrow. That's true, and I can be confident in it and assign a credence of 1 to it. Most things that we should be assigning probabilities to are way away from the extremes, right? Not close to 1, not close to 0. I want to go play tennis this evening. How confident is it that I will show up at the tennis courts in in an hour and 15 minutes from now? I plan on doing it. I'm pretty confident that I'm going to be there. I'm putting that at 0.95, 0.96, maybe, something like that. And that's something that's happening almost immediately that I have a ton of control over. Things that I would be up at 0.999 on that are physical phenomena are something like the sun is going to rise tomorrow, right? Where I mean that loosely in the sense that what we mean by I look out the window and I see the sun coming up. And even that probably shouldn't be that high if I'm saying I'm the one seeing it, because how confident am I that I'm alive tomorrow morning? Hope I'm here. Hope I'm making some more content, but not certain, right? Another thing that is not dealt with here is how probabilities combine together. You can have 10 different things that you're very confident about, 0.95, 0.97, 0.92. Even if those confidences are warranted, how likely is it that all of those things turn out to be true together? Well, if they're independent, we would just multiply their probabilities. So 0.95 times 0.92 times 0.97. Now, maybe they're dependent, maybe they stand or fall together. But as a general rule, when you're bringing together a bunch of different probabilities, the numbers drop precipitously, and it can be very surprising. So even when I'm looking at this argument that GasDive put together, and even if I'm feeling really confident about each of the individual pieces, to say nothing of how logically they are tied together, I'm still saying, man, there are a lot of pieces going on here. Why do I think that all of those are going to combine and I'm going to stay super confident on them? I'm not going to. This number is going to drop off, and it's going to drop off a lot. Okay, those were the 5 premises, and if those 5 premises all held, then I think it's reasonable enough to conclude that our pdoom should be very high, 0.999, something like that. I've reviewed them. Where does that leave us? So there are some points of agreement. I like agreement. Let's be positive here. I agree that ASI is possible. Great. I agree that AI is potentially harmful, right? We could turn out to be misaligned with AI. That could be pretty bad. We should be thinking about how we can design our artificial intelligence and our tools in ways that will align with our interests, that will make the world a better place and a better place for you and me. Great. I also agree that I don't trust people or people to police themselves. Folks at these companies, folks in governments will do things that are maybe good for their short-term gain, and they might not care about their long-term gain or the long-term goods for humanity, or they might just be willing to lie to themselves about how good or bad something is in order to just stay the course and do things that they're currently doing. So I don't think people are going to stop themselves even if they thought ASI was right around the corner, and I agree that we should be careful. So here's something where I don't agree with everything that Bostrom says in his book Superintelligence, but we might take out of it just a general sense that like artificial superintelligence is a possible thing out there, and it's a threat that we should maybe take seriously, and we shouldn't rush into it because it could have unforeseen consequences. Now, I'm way more skeptical of how quickly we could bring it about, but I think there's a lot of reasonable caution in what he says, and I can get on board with that. But now let's look at some disagreements, and let's just run down the argument that we were just looking at and see how I feel about each of these premises. So is ASI possible? I'll say maybe. I would even go green and say yes here as long as we had a restricted enough definition of what ASI is. I'm just going to be a little hesitant because I know people can interpret that in different ways. The second premise that we're going to build ASI, that is the biggest flaw in the argument, in my opinion. I'm like way less than 0.1 on the building of ASI, certainly anytime soon. Now, if you want to open up this time horizon to forever, right? Okay, I can bring that number up. But also as we bring that number up, then the amount of time that's going to pass increases, which means do I think ASI is going to be the thing that kills all of humanity, or do I think something else is going to happen, right? You expand the time horizon enough, and that increases the chance that nuclear war does it, or climate disaster does it, or aliens come in, whatever, right? There are way more possibilities and probabilities that go up in that increased time horizon, even if we increase the chance that we do get ASI by increasing the time horizon. And I said, let's just grant for the sake of argument those points A through E there. If I was being a little more particular, like, are people going to stop themselves? I agree with GasDive now. Society won't stop us. I'm a little less sure. I think international agreements are a little better at preventing certain things from happening, right? We have managed to not have nuclear war and mutually assured destruction in various treaties. Those have proved to be at least somewhat effective, even if they're not, guarantees of things. That's certainly better than individual actors working. Now, am I confident that the AI bubble bursting won't stop ASI from coming about? I'm actually a little more pessimistic on that point than GasDive is. I think if ASI is much less likely to come about in an economic bubble bursting, there'll be some backlash. People will be just trying to take the remains of those AI companies and turn them into like quick profitability rather than build something like artificial superintelligence with it. Same thing, I think that climate disaster or asteroids or other things are more likely to cause human demise and also more likely to prevent ASI from coming about. But again, those are quibbling. By and large, A through E, I'm more in agreement than I am on the 0.2 as a whole, right? Thus the greens and yellows as opposed to the red. Now, do I think we won't solve the alignment problem? I maybe should have made that a red 0.15 because I think it's very like it's reasonably unlikely that we solve the alignment problem, but maybe there's a 15% chance that we solve it, and that seems dramatically higher than what GasDive was thinking. And then when you combine that with my views on premise 4, right, namely that unaligned ASI dooms us, I say, nah, that's actually a pretty dubious conclusion, because if we have unaligned ASI, maybe we can coexist with it. Maybe it will just leave the planet. Maybe it will ignore us, right? Unaligned ASI, I don't think, is as obviously a death knell as GasDive and other doomers tend to make out. And then what is the probability that we end up with unaligned ASI? Well, I think it's negligible. And when you compare that with GasDive, who thinks it's 0.999, we have a huge disagreement. So that, in your minds, look at number 5, make that red instead of yellow, because that's a huge departure. And if that's a huge departure, right, when I take premises 1 through 3, all of that stuff, the rhetoric, and tie it together, I end up with an emphatic disagreement on the conclusion. Just no, the pdoom should not be 0.999. That's not warranted. I'm not that worried. And after this video, I hope y'all agree with me. But what do you think? I think that this stuff can be rhetorically effective. I think there can be some scary discussions out there. But in the end, in my experience, and when I examine the arguments, I just don't see enough weight for us to be that afraid. That's not to say there's no risk. That's not to say that we shouldn't think about it. But maybe sleep a little bit easier. Thank you so much for tuning into my channel, for sticking around. It's been a while since I made a video just for this channel, and I appreciate you still being here. To those of you who are new and haven't liked and subscribed yet, get on it right below. Say hello, get down in the comments. And for all of you, new and old alike, one of the reasons it's been so long since I've made some videos is I just started making a podcast with Carl from the Internet of Bugs. I'll drop a link down below in the description. It's called Philosophy Programs and Prompts. It's here on YouTube. We just got it up for Spotify as well, so whatever platform you prefer, check that out. If you like this channel, I think you're going to like that channel as well. And now, let me do a dramatic reading. So here is the response that I've put down below in the description as well, but I'm just reading GasDive's view. Here's a response I'm recycling, but it addresses the main points. The response might look incomplete, but I take it as read that an ASI can't be controlled and will have goals incompatible with biological survival. While it's physically possible, the chance that it will have such goals, and so will every subsequent ASI, is effectively zero. The set of possible configurations that don't maintain biological life is vastly larger than the set of configurations that maintains biological life over its own goals, and the set of configurations that maintain biological life is vastly larger than the set of configurations that maintain humans. And the set of configurations that maintain humans is vastly larger than the set of configurations that maintain humans in a way humans like. Also, an ASI that is fully and completely controllable by the good guys, while being fully and completely uncontrollable by the bad guys, is very likely to be impossible, particularly if you consider that there are several definitions of the good guys and the bad guys that place individuals in opposite sets. I'm also using ASI and AGI interchangeably. An AGI that is as good as a human researcher will work faster and lead to ASI on a short time scale. So here's the recycled answer to why my pdoom is 0.9999. Okay, break it down. What components comprise this doom, and why is each of them essentially 100% probable? Great question. I know people say this glibly, but this cuts to the heart of the issue. So, there's various stages that AI needs to pass to reach a disastrous outcome. Here's some of them. If you can think of more, we can add them. So, the first and most obvious is ASI physically possible? If it's not, then we're all saved. Well, there are two independent and complementary reasons to think it is possible. Firstly, like powered flight, there's a biological model that proves beyond doubt that there's no law of physics that rules it out. It must be physically possible. Second, while we haven't created an ASI that's better at solving every problem than humans, we have created AIs that are better than all humans at some tasks, and the list of these tasks is growing. Speaking various languages, playing chess, holding simultaneous conversations, solving maths problems, understanding code, so on. So the probability that it's possible is 1. The second obvious stage that it must pass is, Will we build an ASI, particularly with the high probability that it will kill everything? There are a plethora of talented people who are willing to do so, knowing it will result in their own death. Polls of AI research companies reveal that most of them think there's a significant chance that it will kill them. Polls vary, but the median estimate is usually between 5% and 10%, meaning more than half think their research has a more than 5% chance it will kill them and everyone else. So that's answered. Wanting to prevent their own death will not stop most, let alone all researchers. Probability that ASI will pass this stage is 1. But perhaps we as a population will decide to stop them, create an international treaty organization that has inspection, verification, and powers of force. That's physically possible. The issues here that no such agreement has ever been made prior to the banned thing being created. And this must happen with ASI because once created, it cannot be contained or stopped. The second issue is that USA currently has the lead in AI research, and that country has never honored an agreement 1 second longer than it thinks doing so gives them an advantage. They culturally cannot honor an agreement. It's just not in them. The third issue, as I see it, is that the deal needs to be in place very quickly. The Paris Agreement, which was totally inadequate on every level, took over a century to get signed, and the USA didn't honor it. We probably have less than a year until we get recursive self-improvement. Anthropic is already saying that their AI is doing 3 times more research than the humans. But it's definitely less than a century. So for that stage, I can't say that the probability AI will pass is 1, but I estimate a very high chance of failing to stop it. 0.999999. I could be persuaded to drop 1, maybe 2 nines from that with a clever argument. But perhaps the AI bubble will burst, and that will save us? Sadly, the companies that currently own the hardware and IP will not send everything to landfill. When they inevitably run out of money, the employees will research skills they'll not switch to beekeeping. Those things exist now and have some value. They'll just get sold to the remaining companies for peanuts and consolidate knowledge, compute, and talent, actually speeding up research. Chance of AI passing this hurdle? 1. Maybe the climate disaster will destroy civilization in time? That's a tough one to estimate. I see a pretty bad decade ahead, but I can't see it being bad enough to take down the research centers. If anything, I could see governments putting more money into it on the mistaken idea that AI can help them control or oppress the population. Maybe if the permafrost thaws faster than I expect and research proceeds slower, the British actuaries are putting at 2050, which is well beyond any reasonable projection for ASI arrival. I'll put that one at 0.999999, but the error bars are large. A big asteroid impact? There's nothing in the solar system that's going to hit in the next 100 years. We could get a long period comet or something from outside the solar system. And that sort of thing's probably 1 in a billion year event. And something large enough to do the job will probably be visible years in advance. We don't have that many years up our sleeves. We might have a big breakthrough in alignment research. Well, that's possible. AI research is currently funded about 100 times more than AI safety research. But even if there is such a breakthrough, that leaves the issue, how do you build something that's perfectly controllable by the good guys and perfectly not controllable by the bad guys, and who picks which is which, applied not just to the first, but to all subsequent ASIs? So for that one, we have to get all 4. Breakthrough, perfectly controllable, not controllable, perfectly directed, and every subsequent. I'm going to put that one at 0.999999999. I find it completely absurd to even contemplate. Mountain gorillas don't rule humans, and we won't rule AI. There's a few other possibilities that I can see forward, like if it's so intelligent, it'll just naturally cherish us, or why would it want to hurt us, which are too absurd to even address. Thus ends the dramatic reading of the comment from GasDive. Thanks everybody for listening. If you'd like me to read more texts on video, just let me know. Maybe I'll get into some audiobooks. Never know. I need to have something back up in my sleeve. Bye everybody.